Hi, welcome to Radio 4's Consumer Programme. Today, a warning on recruitment scams that are all about gathering your personal information to take out loans in your name.
I get a letter from the Department for Work and Pensions telling them that I owe them £1,416.42.
There's a report today on who uses food banks. It says more families with someone in work and a lot of people leaving care. And how working men's clubs are changing what they offer to survive. Women are running them for a start.
So we're in our lounge. This is where we play most of our games. We host bingo on a Tuesday and full family fun every Sunday.
Was there a working men's club where you grew up? What was it like? Is it still going? Mine was St Teresa's, Norris Green, Liverpool. It's still there. To get in touch, email us please, you and yours, at bbc.co.uk or send us a text to 84844. First, the Consumer Council for Water released its latest household complaints report today. It received the highest number of complaints about water companies in almost a decade. Bills dominated customers' concerns after the highest water bill rises since privatisation. This year, average water and sewage bills went from under £500 to more than £600 a year. On the plus side, complaints by customers to the water companies themselves fell last year by 8%. So the rises in complaints that aren't resolved by the water companies and that then have to be escalated. Melissa Stroud has taken her complaint against Thames Water to the company, to the Consumer Council for Water and to her MP. It's still not sorted. It all started in June when some people from Thames Water turned up at her house in Pamber Heath in Hampshire. She told me what happened.
I was at home, just a normal evening, sat in my living area at the back of the house, and I noticed that my husband had gone into the back garden to greet some engineers. They just turned up unannounced. I think it was one or two gentlemen had come. They told my husband that there was a problem with the drain and that the lorries would need to come. And from that point onwards, the lorries have come several times a day.
So tell me about the problem that they're trying to fix, what it is that the lorries are doing when they keep coming to your home.
So on the 4th of June, it was identified up the road, the sewer has broken in somebody's back garden and the sewer fills up with waste. Back along the line over to my house. I have the next manhole cover that Thames Water needs to access. So when they take off the manhole cover, you see a very, very deep drain. It's about 5 metres deep and the whole chamber fills up with dirty water. And that is what they need to suck out because the sewage does not flow past the break.
So since then, these lorries have just kept coming to your home?
Yes, I believe we're on day 97 now. The lorries attend. We had an initial suggestion that the lorries may attend 8 in the morning through to 8 at night, but this has not happened on many occasions. Even as late as a couple of weeks ago, we had lorries attending at nearly midnight to pump out the sewage from the drain. Unfortunately, midnight, super late, super disturbing. It gets worse when the rain comes. You can imagine getting into the winter, more water coming, more rain, more tankering, more disruption.
The obvious question is, why can Thames Water not just fix the collapsed sewer? You must have asked that question many, many times.
So they're saying that the sewer is actually, where it's broken in another back garden, it's actually extremely close to a property. So that is making the situation really complicated. The first company came and did all of their own tests over some days, and they drew the conclusion that they are not able to complete the works. Therefore, Thames have engaged with another company and they are now starting over their works and we're having more tests done. We imagine these works will continue and have been advised until probably the end of April.
Wow. So you've got all this going on in your back garden and it's going to carry on for almost a year. What's been the impact on all your lives? What is it like living in a house where there's endless sewage pumping going on day and night?
I can't begin to tell you how horrible this is. This is a really difficult issue for my family and I. We have not had a holiday this year. We cannot leave our property. Our gate gets left open. We couldn't use our garden for the entire summer. We've missed celebrations. We missed Father's Day. We missed bank holidays. We missed other celebrations that we would have had. We've had lack of privacy as people turn up generally unannounced into the back garden. Also, another impact has been the time upon my life. I spend hours on the phone. I'm not underestimating that. It is hours. It's exhaustive. It's a case of negotiating with truck drivers who block my drive and I can't leave my drive. I have to go negotiate. Please may I leave my drive? Please may I take my car off my drive? Sometimes to be met with pleasantries, but not always, I'm afraid. It's been really difficult. It has a very, very poor impact upon everybody's mental health. This isn't just 1 or 2 days. We understand things need to be mended. This is a full 97, approaching 100 days of disruption, and we're not even at the point of fixing or even knowing the fix.
Is it noisy?
It is so noisy. It is awful. It's right at the front of my home. Well, that's where I sleep, or I don't sleep. I've had broken sleep. We haven't been able to have our windows open. It smells terrible. At times, fumes from the lorry, including diesel fumes and sewage fumes, are from the truck at the front of my house, are directed into my living room. It comes in through my garage. It comes in through the letterbox. I can't stop it. It's really unpleasant. I also have alerted Thames Water that we have an asthmatic in the home. That's definitely a hazard to my health and a hazard to that of my family.
Melissa Stroud, we invited Thames Water onto the programme, as you'd expect, but they didn't want to come on. They sent us a statement instead. Here it is. We sincerely apologise for the disruption being caused by our sewer repair work. The repairs have proven more complex than initially anticipated due to the ground conditions, proximity to property utilities and the depth of the sewer. Multiple surveys are currently being coordinated to enable us to plan our next steps. Mike Kyle is the Chief Executive at the Consumer Council for Water. Mike, hi. Let's start then with the good news in your report today. Complaints to water companies themselves are down by 8% to just on 206,000. Generally, is the service getting any better?
Hi, Winifred. Yeah, it is good that there are fewer complaints being made from people to their water companies. 206,000 is still a lot of complaints. Are things getting better? That number still seems too high to me. Clearly, I don't want to grumble about a reduction in complaints, but people want water to be a service that they can trust and rely on 24/7 without having to make that effort to pick up the phone or hit their keyboards to complain to their water company. So I think there's a lot more the water companies can do to reduce the causes of complaints and also handle complaints better, because we're still seeing far too many complaints coming to us.
Yes, how do you explain that? The complaints to them has fallen, but the complaints to you have risen. So those are complaints where they can't resolve it or they don't resolve it. Up 3% complaints to you to 8,235.
Yeah, there's two things going on here. There are clearly some complaints that companies are not doing a good job at resolving, and those go through the company's process, get exhausted, then come to us. And they tend to be the more complex one. You've just given a very good example of something that is very complex with the horrible situation that Melissa has been suffering and continues to suffer. So there's clearly some complaints that companies are just not well equipped at handling, and companies need to look at their process and go, are they really focusing on getting a resolution? It's not good enough just trying to fix easy ones. You've got to be able to fix the complicated ones. So that's one thing that's going. The other thing that's going on, and you will be aware of this from your postback that you get in terms of people writing to you about water issues, is that the strength of feeling about water is incredibly strong. And people actually want to write to us to lodge that complaint to a higher authority to get that complaint registered that they are unhappy about the service they've received from the water and sewage company. So those two things are going on simultaneously, which explains why the overall complaints to companies can fall, but complaints to us can increase. And as we're very disappointed in these figures. Because
there's this growing anger and growing distrust. Now, you named Thames Water, Yorkshire Water, South West Water, Affinity Water and SES Water as the poorest performing water companies. You say Wessex Water, Portsmouth Water and Bristol Water are the best. So what are those three doing well?
Yeah, one of the things that we hear about consistently is that communication is absolutely the key to a complaint of any nature. People want to be kept informed. They want to have their expectations managed correctly and accurately. And I think the key for a lot of complaints is making sure you are treating people fairly and talking to them in the right way, in a way people understand, not being patronising, and just treating them with that respect and keeping them informed throughout the end-to-end process. Because we get so many complaints, and you see the underpinning cause of dissatisfaction with contact is actually as simple as poor communication. So companies need to think about how they're doing that, and really look at, are they using, say, third parties, outsourcing stuff to people who don't necessarily care as much as they should do, So go back to basics, communicate well, treat people fairly. That's the key.
Mike Kyle from the Consumer Council for Water, thank you. Well, Thames Water is still tottering on the brink of collapse. It has debts of over $17 billion to investors. It owes fines of $104 million that have been imposed by the regulator in May of this year for sewage spills. Thames was fined a further $18.2 million for breaking dividend rules by paying out money to investors despite having fallen short in its services to customers and its environmental record. Sadita Helm is Professor of Economic Policy at Oxford University. Sadita, welcome and thank you for coming on. Now, we've just heard Mike Kyle talk about outsourcing, the problems with outsourcing to people who don't care as much as you would expect the original company to care, perhaps. You just heard that story from Melissa about Thames Water. Now, what they have done is employed an outside contractor initially who couldn't do this work in the end, and now they've had to start all over again. That's a mess, isn't it?
It's definitely a mess. Sometimes outsourcing is a good thing to do. It's prevalent right across the economy, and sometimes it's not. The problem for Thames and for water companies generally is that we've had 3 decades of patch and mend, and the states of these infrastructures are, let's put it kindly, not particularly good. And then you really need to understand the system yourself in order to work out how to have an enduring solution to the kinds of problems that your listener reported earlier in your programme. So the fundamental problem here is the state of the networks. And patch and mend can be done by your own team. It can be done outsourced. But first of all, you've actually got to understand the system you're operating on. And what we've discovered, particularly with respect to the sewers, is for quite a long time, amazingly, they don't actually know what's going on.
They cover a huge geographical area, don't they, Thames? A massive company. Generally speaking, is anything at Thames Water improving right now?
Well, Thames is, a quarter of the industry. It's massive. It's massive by European standards, let alone UK standards. And if you look at the category of failures at Thames, they admit their management has not been up to it. The current turnaround is not really working. And all the time, the primary preoccupation of the company appears to be how to salvage as much of the debt as it possibly can from the current circumstances, rather than that long-term turnaround. I'm sure there are examples of really good practice. I'm sure there are people on the front line doing their best, but it's basically a failed company. And when a company fails, like in any other sector of the economy, you need a failure regime. And we have a special administration procedure for dealing with these sorts of companies. And that's exactly what should be done with Thames. It should be put in the hands of new owners who can better manage and drive this forward, including an enormous improvement to the infrastructure and turnaround. And this is the rub. If you really want to sort out Thames, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And for that, you need to go the mile, take your customers with you, explain what you're doing, and yes, just deliver.
If the government took it into, what did you call it, special management, and then found another company, or broke it up and made it into lots of other companies and found other people to take it on, happens with this massive debt book? Does that fall to us, the taxpayer? Because that is why the government doesn't want to step in and take it over, isn't it? The debt.
There's a lot of spin about the debt and about the costs of putting it to administration. The business would be taken into special administration. The special administrator, like in any other procedure in other industry, looks for alternative people who would like to bid for it. And given that there's all those assets there, what's called the regulatory asset base, etc., this company's worth a lot of money. After all, you and me, I don't know if you're a Thames customer, pay regularly our bills. There's cash coming in all the time. It's not short of cash. Now, the business would be sold on. I think it should be broken up. I think it's just too big to manage. I think London Water should be separate from the rest. The administrator receives the money from whoever are fit and proper people who buy it at a reasonable price. And what comes out of that, first of all, pays off any cost to the government of running this process. So the cost to the government is zero. And then what the residual is handed out to the existing investors, and they just have to take the haircut and the write down because, as owners of the company, effectively they failed. So there is no cost to the customers of doing this. There is no cost to the taxpayers. There's a huge cost to the current investors in the business, some of whom got us into the mess that we're currently in at the moment. That's what special administration's for. The reason we're not doing special administration, or the government's keen to project it as being all very difficult, very expensive, etc., is because I think they're petrified at their backbenchers would use the opportunity to push for full nationalisation, and that the Treasury doesn't want to happen. And I happen to have some sympathy with the view that it's not clear that nationalisation would solve the problems, but it's a political reason this is not being done, not that the process is badly designed. It's designed exactly for a failing company like Thames. And the longer it's kicked down the road, the longer it is to get to a turnaround, and the longer this patch and mend goes on and customers suffer the consequences.
Professor Sadita Helm, thank you. Last financial year, 4% of UK households used a food bank at least once. That's a calculation that's been done by the Department for Work and Pensions. And the Department for Work and Pensions says that amounts to around 2.8 million people. A report published today by the biggest food bank charity, Trussell, looks at who those people are. It says 30% of people referred to them are in working households, and a high number of people who have been in care are relying on food banks now. Cherise left care at 18 and moved back to her hometown of Stockport. She's 23 now and she has a child aged 4. She told me how she started using the food bank.
I was in the middle of leaving care. I turned 18 and I began living on my own. I'd moved back to my hometown and I wasn't in work and I was really struggling to make ends meet with universal credit. So I was utilising a food bank. However, I did then get into paid employment and was still in need of the food bank. However, I am still employed and I still also need to utilise the food pantry, which is very similar to the food bank.
When you left care, obviously that contributes, I suppose, to the situation of needing to go to a food bank. Was there nobody locally, no agency or no family who could give you some money if you ran out?
I was receiving support from the local authority as I was a care leaver. Similar to the food bank, how they provide like some tins and stuff like that and to support you. They would drop that off.
And no family?
No, it's not something I was in a position to rely upon family for.
How does it work?
So obviously when you begin living on your own, you receive some support with, furnishings and actually getting moved in. A part of that is getting set up for like the food pantry, because with my local authority, with the care leavers, it's luckily funded, even though it is about £4.50 every go. We still find it very useful, and luckily as we don't pay for it, it's it's £20 to £30 worth of food a week, and it is really, really helpful, especially with the cost of living crisis. It's like a little shop with food in, and you can pick certain items to make a meal out of. It is really helpful, even with being employed, obviously. The cost of everything is so high at the minute and wages aren't covering it.
Obviously, it is harder if you live alone, isn't it? Because all the bills are down to you. Tell us about your situation now, how much money comes in and where it goes.
I think I'm working 2, maybe 3 jobs at the minute. I do a lot of volunteering and I am claiming universal credit with support for childcare, stuff like that. Once the bills go out, I think I'm left over with £100 a month. My fellow care leavers, we're all in the same predicament. We all go to the same food pantry. There's loads of us there. Do you ever go hungry because of lack of money? Unfortunately, I've been very close to those predicaments, but especially with a child, you need to have something to fall upon. Luckily, we never get to that point where, we are going hungry. There's a credit card. Unfortunately, you have to rely upon these things. A lot of people might rely on, overdraft, but I can't be in a position where my daughter goes hungry.
Did it ever happen when you had just recently left care?
Yeah, I went hungry many times, many times.
So you're using the food banks regularly. Do you think that more people are using them than used to when you were 18?
Absolutely. There's so many people. So when I started going, I felt really like I might be judged, for example, but I think nowadays it's so normalised because everybody's in the same boat, to be quite honest. All ages, families, young people as well, literally all kinds of people.
And lots of people who, like you, are in work or doing even more than one job.
Yes, unfortunately so.
That's Cherise, a care leaver who works with Become. It's a national charity for young people who have experienced the care system. Helen Barnard is Director of Policy Research and Impact at Trussell. Helen, if we could just look at some of what Cherise believes is happening with food banks. She believes that the use of them has increased hugely since she started using them at the age of 18 5 years ago.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. So what we've seen is 2 things happening. One is the number of people who are facing hunger has gone up massively. Just between 2022 and 2024, we saw a jump to the number of people who have faced hunger going from 11.6 million in 2022, jumping right up to 14.1 million last year when we did the most recent research. So we've seen that underlying need has really shot up. And at the same time, in food banks in the Trussell community, so last year we provided 3.1 million emergency food parcels. That was up about 50% compared to 5 years ago. And as Cherise says, there are also independent food banks, there are other charitable food providers. So we are seeing this really worrying picture of more people facing hunger. And also the other thing that we're seeing on the ground is people facing deeper hardship and more sustained hardship. And it almost becoming normalised that people start thinking it's a routine part of life to have to skip meals or not be able to afford essentials, which is very worrying.
Part of the problem is that benefits go up in line with inflation, but the inflation for essentials like food, like energy, has risen at a much steeper rate. Now, she also described how the agencies who were supporting her when she left care referred her to a food bank. You have to be referred, don't you, to get food? You can't just turn up, to a trussle anyway. Can you explain to us then how those referrals work? Who can be referred?
So anybody who is facing problems affording the essentials, affording food, can be referred.
But it would have to be by?
So there's quite a wide range of people. So advice agencies like Citizens Advice can refer people. We often find GPs, social workers, health visitors. So any of the agencies who are trying to support people in a local community, most of them will have a link to their local food bank and be able to refer somebody.
The scale of it now, people say that you have just become an arm of the welfare state. And listening to Cherise, you can see that, can't you? That she's referred by the people who are paid to help her when she leaves care. There is an acknowledgement that she won't be able to manage without going to the food bank.
And that, I think, is part of this worrying trend of normalisation. We've got a whole generation of children who've grown up thinking it's normal to have a food bank in every town, and that didn't used to be the case. And we've got this kind of fundamental problem that the social security system, which should be, the kind of safety net that helps you when times are difficult. What we're seeing is, say, in universal credit, people who are getting universal credit, more than half of them have faced hunger. And that's because the level is set without any reference to how much essentials cost. And it is so low that there is no way you can make that budget stretch week by week to cover just all the essentials that people need.
You mentioned these emergency food parcels that you supply. That started around 2008 after the financial crash. And as you say, the numbers over the 5 years have risen hugely. If you look at the graph, it just shoots straight up. And you're now distributing more than 3 million of them. It has started to come down a bit, though, that figure, hasn't it? Does that mean that things are easing for some families?
Well, you're right, we saw a bit of a dip last year. But actually, when we kind of dug into that, what we think is happening is two things. One is actually more need is going unmet, very sadly, because, as I said, the research we published today, which looks at how many people are facing hunger, is showing that is keeping going up and up. And many food banks, both trussle food banks and independent food banks, are really struggling to keep up with the need. And I think the other thing we've seen is lots of other organisations in communities starting up their own version, in a sense, of a food bank. So GP surgeries, primary schools, many organisations now they feel they need to have their own kind of bit of their service that can help people with those essential goods. So I think what we're seeing is not an easing, we're actually seeing a bedding in of an incredibly high level of hardship.
Briefly, if you would, what's happening with donations? Because money is tight, isn't it?
It is, and that is definitely something we're seeing. So people remain incredibly generous, but we have seen donations kind of being squeezed. So now most food banks are having to buy in food in order to provide to people, whereas if you go back a few years, food banks could roughly meet the need in their community from donations from their community. But actually we have gone far beyond what a local charity can hope to do, because those big national systems like social security have just become so inadequate.
Helen Barnard from the anti-poverty charity Trussell, thank you. The Department of Work and Pensions told us this government is determined to tackle the unacceptable rise in food bank dependence, in addition to extending free school meals and ensuring the poorest children don't go hungry in the holidays, with £1 billion to reform crisis support. Our Child Poverty Task Force will publish an ambitious strategy later on this year. We're also overhauling job centres and reforming the broken welfare system to support people into good, secure jobs, while always protecting those who need it most. This is You and Yours, Radio 4's consumer programme. It's 29 minutes to 1 now. Tomorrow in London, there's a one-day conference all about how to revive social clubs. It's been organised by Stir to Action. That's a co-op that works with communities and businesses to promote economic growth. Social clubs, the majority of them working men's clubs, were part of life in industrial areas for more than 100 years. They had their heyday in the 1960s and 70s. Since then, 3/4 of them have closed, leaving around 1,200 left. The ones that remain have branched out to try to serve a wider range of people. Bob Walker reports now, beginning in the village where he grew up, where the social club has gone, and moving on to clubs in Chesterfield and London that have managed to keep going.
I'm standing outside what was once the Miners' Welfare Club in the village of Whitwell in North East Derbyshire. It's a large red brick building which used to house a labyrinth of function rooms, bars and a concert hall. The parking bay was a well-used bowling green, and houses now stand on what were tennis courts. Now, I have fond memories of the welfare, or the welly as we used to call it. It was at the heart of this former pit village, but it was closed years ago and stood derelict before it was converted into flats. Now, many clubs which used to flourish in similar communities are struggling to survive. But there are beacons of hope.
Wow. Do you want some Coca-Cola? So we're in our lounge. This is where we play most of our games. We host bingo on a Tuesday and full family fun every Sunday. So I'm Emma Johnson, I'm a trustee, and I am also the secretary of the Arkwright Miners' Welfare. We're very welcoming and accommodating to families. The children are allowed to play the games, they're allowed to play for sweets and chocolate rather than money, and it just gets them all involved, and families feel like they can come with children rather than feeling exiled if they start making a bit of noise.
In my day, I'm pretty certain children wouldn't have been allowed in.
If you can't appeal to families, you're not going to get your people to come in. People can't afford babysitters anymore, so unless they can come out with children, it's very rare they're going to get a night out, or they don't want people looking at them if the children are making noise. So we've got the games room and the family room. It's a bit quieter. They can sit, they can draw, they can do all sorts.
Now this is pretty traditional, so you do keep some of those traditional elements.
Yeah, absolutely. Snooker table is probably the most popular. The darts board we actually moved. We've made it more of a focal point, and now that is played, it's used very, very often.
This is where you would have what we would call turns. Bands, acts. Does that still happen?
We do go down the traditional artist route. It's available for hire. Anything ranging from first birthday parties and very sadly all the way up to funerals. Tomorrow we're hosting a family movie night, so we're partly in preparation for that.
That's a first.
Yes, so this first time we're doing a family movie night. We like to put events on for the kids as well. So as we mentioned previously, if the kids are happy, so are the parents. They'll stay, they'll spend money behind the bar. Tomorrow we are hosting outdoor for 3 hours, loads of bouncy castles, all for free, just as a thank you and a bit of a give back to the community.
So back in my day, here we go again, back in my day, I think it was pretty rare to find a woman, to be frank, on the committee running the place.
Yep, absolutely. So there's myself and Linda, who's the treasurer. The boys won't mind us saying we are the backbone, we keep them in line. The majority of the committee are predominantly women. We do have some males, but yeah, the majority of the club is female run. I don't mind saying my age, I'm 37. Your miners' welfares tend to be run by your older generation, and I think that's another thing, our committee are quite young as well. We've got a very broad spectrum, so we try and appeal to a range of ages and compromise on events that we put on as well.
Many clubs in the past actually did organise activities for children. You just rarely saw them near the bars or in the evenings. Dr Ruth Cherrington is the author of Not Just Beer and Bingo, a social history of working men's clubs. She's been warning since the 80s that they had to adapt or die.
A lot of committees were stuck in a rut. You know, it was a period when women hadn't got equal rights in clubs. You know, you were a lady member, you couldn't be on the committee, etc. And I was just making suggestions, ideas about opening up, having different sorts of entertainment, maybe hiring out to different activities during the daytime, just opening the doors and making the place more friendly to people who've never been in clubs before. It's only been in the last 20 years or so, even the last 10 for some, that they've gone on the internet and had web pages. I was putting the ideas out in articles I was writing and on a website, etc., and talking to officials in the club movement, but probably thought it's good to listen to ideas, but people just carried on in many places doing what they did, and many didn't survive then.
One place that has most definitely survived is the Mildmay Social Club in North London, formed as a radical club in 1888 where local people would meet and discuss societal changes. Membership had fallen to around 300, but over the last decade it's increased tenfold, helped partly by popular music events like this.
Fill the dance floor. This is On the Corner. Thank you to the Mildmay for having us tonight.
Andy McCaddy is the club president.
North London's changed a lot. There's a lot of younger folks looking for somewhere to call home. They come in their droves, so we need to balance between looking after our core traditional members and getting new members in. We have very traditional type music when we have the usual club singers that come in. We've always had the same offerings of snooker, darts and pool, but now we have to open it out to get new members. So Northern Soul Nights, which are always packed and sold out, tribute nights with bands. We also have jazz nights. We run Kayleys a couple of times a year. At weekends, we do vintage clothing stall, which has many, many people from all over London that come to the vintage clothing. We do weddings. That's a real, I suppose it's cash cow for us, really. Not so much for the members, but that certainly helps look after the building, because the building is a vast, vast building with vast bills to go along with it. So that's one of the biggest challenges, is balancing the chequebook.
And one major fundraiser is the club's appeal as a location for film, television and advertising shoots. For the last 7 years, member Sam Menezes has worked to market the Mildmay to a wide range of production companies that want to use the club's authentic decor as a backdrop.
I've seen grown men, directors, etc., move to tears because they just walk in and they just remember this smell, this feeling, this vibe, this aesthetic. It's really nice when you see the club through the eyes of the people who have that sort of the cinematographer's eyes, and they just see this sort of beautiful space. You can really understand why it's in such high demand. You can never create that authenticity in a studio.
And she says other clubs in the city are also looking to boost their income in a similar way. Representatives from clubs across the country will take part in a conference organised by Stir to Action, a group which supports grassroots organisations and businesses. Johnny Gordon Farley is a director of Stir to Action. He says the conference is aimed at helping to rebuild what he describes as the social club movement.
Within recent years, we've obviously seen government and plans around rebuilding neighbourhoods. The Music Venues Trust work has really highlighted the closure of grassroots music venues. Clubs have been really important as a kind of circuit for emerging talent. And so we've got heritage groups there, we've got music and culture groups there, we've got social infrastructure bodies there. And the idea is, one is trying to recognise the role that clubs could play over the next generation, looking back to their past, but also saying we still have these community assets. They should feature in government policy, government-funded programmes like Plan for Neighbourhoods, and we really need to take this heritage seriously and back it, essentially.
Johnny Gordon Farley from Stir to Action talking with Bob Walker. Dave Fletcher in Chesterfield texted to say, please don't call them working men's clubs. We call them community clubs or social clubs. I work in one. We have to get away from that 1970s image or they will be no more. Lots of people are looking for work at the minute. The jobs market's cooled, vacancies have fallen. This hunt for jobs is being exploited by criminals who are sending out fake job offers on social media and posting fake vacancies on genuine online recruitment sites. If you respond and get caught in their traps, it will cost you. Possibly in money, definitely in hours and hours of stress. A listener contacted our specialist fraud reporter, Shari Val, to warn people to be really careful about supplying personal details in online job applications. Shari's here.
Yeah, this is Joe. Now, Joe is 30 and he lives in West London, and this all started for him last autumn.
I was looking for work at the time. I was a freelancer in the film and TV industry. After COVID and acting strikes, it made finding work a lot more difficult, so much so that I wasn't able to sustain myself. So I looked around for other different types of work. I became a bit desperate, searching for lots of different things on CV websites and applying to them. Despite my CV, I didn't get a lot of responses. And one of the ones I did seemed rather enticing.
Where did you find this job? I mean, what, was it on a website or was it in a newspaper, or how did you find it?
I found this through Indeed. It was a dental practice in Chiswick. It was a position just for an administration job. And I thought, that's good, I can do that, and the pay isn't that bad. And I looked at the website that they linked to, and I thought, brilliant, yeah, it looks good. I see where it is. That'll be easy to get to even. The profile itself, absolutely fine on Indeed. So I applied for the job through there.
Now, Joe obviously thought he finally struck lucky when he found this job as an administrator at a dentist near where he lives. The whole recruitment process was online.
I used my CV, and following that, they interviewed me back through their email account. And it was through the email account that they asked more about me. They said, we'd like to see you. How about the idea of a trial shift? How does that sound to you? And this is something I've done at other jobs before in my life, where you go in for a shift, they see how you are, still fit in. And yeah, I was happy to do it. All I needed to do was, they wanted my bank account details, that's fine, so that they can actually pay me. They wanted my driver's license so they could prove who I was. And they wanted my national insurance number, like you'd need to give for a job.
So, Shari, nothing face-to-face, not even a phone call. But the process does end with this offer of a trial shift for which Joe would be paid.
That's right. Now, all the interviewing and the assessment was by email. And that's not what you'd expect in a genuine recruitment process. And for me, it's a big red flag. So Joe was emailed with a time for his trial shift, and it was a week away. So at the end of October last year, he arrived at the dental practice nice and early, hoping to start work.
So I'm stood outside this dentist in Chiswick. It's not open. I think that's fine. I'm half an hour early. So I go have a coffee. I come back and we're getting a bit closer to the time. And there's someone else stood there. And I think, oh, okay. I asked them, you here for a trial shift as well? They went, yeah. Okay. So we chatted a little bit. We waited together. As it got closer to time, more and more people turned up. I think there was a total of 6 of us now all waiting for the trial shift. We're all still standing outside. We're all a bit confused as to what's going on. We think, oh, maybe it will be sort of like a group interview and they'll whittle us down. But as it reaches the allotted time and the dentist still isn't open, we call the number that's been given to us in the emails, which is unfortunately an invalid number. So, okay, they've given us a second one, we'll try that. That doesn't go through either. So we go to the official website, we use their phone number, call up, and we say, hi, there's a bunch of us here for this trial shift, like job interview. We're still outside and we haven't been let in. We were then informed that the company itself was not putting out any job applications. They were not looking for new hires or staff.
And that's when they all twigged together that they'd been done over by criminals and the whole thing was a scam. So they realised to their horror what the criminals had wanted from them was their personal details for use in identity fraud. So remember, Joe and the others had handed over their CV, their names, their addresses, their telephone numbers, their bank sort codes and account numbers, their email addresses and national insurance numbers and copies of their driver's licence, or in the case of one of the 6 I spoke to, her passport.
Wow, so that is the box set you need, isn't it, for identity fraud? But aren't they the details, Shari, that you would expect to supply if you've been offered paid work?
Yeah, but not until after you got the job and you were in the office. And that's another crucial red flag to spot that this is a scam. Being asked for all this personal information so early in the recruitment process.
Did all the people involved report it? You can see them standing there, can't you, in your mind's eye? They must have felt so terrible.
In the cold. Yeah, they all reported it. They all reported it immediately to the recruitment website, Indeed. And some, including Joe, reported it to Action Fraud and joined those reports together so it could be seen as one scam. And they swapped phone numbers amongst themselves, set up a WhatsApp group to keep in touch. And I asked Joe what he felt when he realised the job he'd applied for just wasn't real.
Fear. I wondered about the unknown. Identity fraud wasn't something I was particularly familiar with. I didn't know how deep it could go or what they could take from me.
What happened then?
Well, I continued thinking about it for quite a while. I called banks. I called to see what people could do with said information, that sort of thing. I tried to see if I could have my national insurance number changed, which was denied. I was told that I've done all I can with the information I've got. I've just got to see how it pans out, and there's no point worrying about it now.
So what happened?
Well, nothing at first. It all went completely quiet and Joe thought that everything was all right.
But it wasn't.
No. Scroll forward 6 months. So 6 months later, Joe found out what the criminals had done.
In April, I get a letter from the Department for Work and Pensions, Debt Centre in Trafford for debt management, telling them that I owe them £1,416.42. It's a real letter. I looked everything up, I double-checked it, and the first thing I did was get on the phone with them. They told me that this money had been taken out via universal credit loan. I explained that it wasn't me and that I had been the victim of identity theft the previous year.
So the DWP took all the information down, including the Action Fraud reports, the reports to the recruitment website, Indeed, everything he could think of to prove it wasn't him who applied for this universal credit loan. And they said, that's the DWP said, they would stop trying to get the money back from him and go off and investigate.
And I thought, brilliant, because all of my evidence I've piled up and everything I've given to them is very straightforward. It couldn't possibly have been me, and I thought this will be open and shut. This is their problem now. They've got to deal with it.
And what actually happened?
What actually happened was the day before I was about to go away for a couple of days on holiday, I get a letter from Universal Credit called a decision review. The subtitle is, "Your identity was not used fraudulently to make a Universal Credit claim."
Gosh, do you claim Universal Credit?
No, I've never qualified for it.
What did they do then?
They said, "This is the date we gave it to you, the 24th of October, which is the day after I accepted the trial shift." So before I even turned up at the dentist's, they had already applied for said loan and they got the advance. The amount of advance is £1,416.42. It's still currently the outstanding balance.
So the DWP then, they investigate, they decide against Joe, even though he can supply all this evidence of what has really happened to him.
Yeah, that's right. 2 weeks ago, the letter arrived saying, "We don't believe you, pay up now." And I asked Joe then which bank account this 1,400 quid or so for this Universal Credit loan was paid into.
I have no idea, and they won't tell me because I can't get into the Universal Credit account because I can't answer recovery questions to an account that was named after me.
And you didn't set up?
The problem regarding the information that they're asking of me, they're asking for things like recovery questions, like what colour is my first car? And those aren't answers that I set, so I don't know the answer to them. The options they give me on the letter about disagreeing and whatnot, I can't even disagree with them because I can't access the account to be able to pull it up on the electronic system.
Can you only appeal through the electronic system?
Yes, it seems like it.
And Winifred, even more weirdly, another letter from DWP arrived at Joe's house, again about a Universal Credit loan, but this time it was addressed to someone completely unknown to Joe, called Georgie. Joe has no idea whether this letter is a mistake or the criminal's using his address in someone else's name to apply for a Universal Credit loan. So then, Winifred, this starts to, if it hasn't already, this starts to slide into the realms of one of those horrible anxiety dreams.
Yeah, it was already a nightmare.
Yes. When you've said, "Look, this isn't me," what have they said back to you?
It depends on who you ask. When Universal Credit, I tell them this, they tell me that I should call benefit fraud. When I tell benefit fraud this, they tell me I should call Universal Credit. When I then tell Universal Credit, I have told this to benefit fraud, they tell me that I should tell this to debt management. When I tell this to debt management, they tell me how would I like to pay my balance. I explain on the phone that this debt is not mine and it's fraudulently been taken out in my name. So they ask, well, how are you going to pay it? I explain further that this is fraud and this money was never in my bank account and I can prove that. To which they say, well, if you're not going to pay it back, then we might have to take it through your employer.
Now, you can hear there that Joe is really exasperated by all this, but also he's really, really frightened.
I'm kind of terrified by it, honestly. I'm worried it will destroy my credit rating. I'm worried that this isn't the end of it. I mean, they've still got my details. What's stopping them from doing something like this again? I have flickering thoughts of perhaps I'll just pay it and, that will be the end of it. I won't have to think about it and that peace of mind might be worth it. But the problem is, if I pay it, I'm just an easy mark and they could do it again. There's nothing to say it. I don't want to admit that this is me because it's not.
It's horrible.
Oh, poor Joe. But Winifred, he's one of many of this kind of fraud has seen a huge jump because lots of young people are out looking for work and they're more likely to head straight to the online job sites. And of course, the criminals are adapting and getting better at it all the time. Keith Rosser is the chairman of Jobs Aware, and it's a partnership set up between the government, the police and the recruitment industry to try to protect people like Joe.
Criminals, when advertising fake jobs, are after two main things. They're either after money, and there's various different ways they can go about that, or they're after personal details, because those details can be used to facilitate other types of crime.
Now, in this case with Joe, the criminals have set up a job in quite a sophisticated way, requiring him to go to a trial shift. So that, of course, they said, oh, we'll pay you for that. And of course, he's handed over his bank details. They have then gone on to the Department of Work and Pensions and applied and got a Universal Credit loan. Do you see much of that?
Sadly, we do see a lot of identity theft to set up other types of criminality. We even had a case of someone in an actual job who left their real job thinking they'd got a new job and not only became unemployed, but their personal details were used to take out a car on finance and set up various companies. So really shocking.
What are the warning signs? Because when you look on Indeed, for example, which is where Joe found this job, it's very difficult to tell what's real and what isn't.
It's become increasingly more difficult over the last few years. A few years ago, there were clear telltale signs because the adverts wouldn't be very well worded, or perhaps the information wasn't relevant to the UK, pay was in dollars. But what we're seeing now is far greater sophistication from the scammers. These job adverts look good. The hiring processes often are appropriate, and the documentation, application forms and things that are used look really convincing. So I have a huge amount of sympathy for work seekers now.
What about these online platforms? They are very big organisations. Indeed, for example, is global. I've asked Indeed what kind of checks they do on employers to make sure that the jobs that they're advertising on their website are real, and they've not answered my question. What kind of responsibility do the online platforms have?
Since the creation of the Online Safety Act, these job boards really have a very large responsibility now to protect their customers. Recently, Lord Hampson, who's the UK's fraud minister, he encouraged all online platforms to prioritise proactive steps they could take to safeguard the public. Dame Chi Onwurah, who's the chair of the Technology Select Committee, said how concerning it is to see fraudsters using platforms to scam young people, and the current online safety regime must be toughened. So the Online Safety Act has brought in a responsibility to tackle fraud on online platforms. What we're currently seeing is a lag in terms of the take-up by the sector to meet the requirements they have under the Online Safety Act. So absolutely more needs to be done.
So, Winifred, I must tell you that Indeed have also told me that every month they remove millions of job posts that what they say don't meet our strict quality standards.
How can you check then if a job ad with them is real?
Well, I asked them this and they gave some guidelines, and the top one was to check the email address you get the response from. So remember, Joe did an interview by email. So when we looked, we noticed one letter different in the genuine dentist's email address, and it's very difficult to spot unless you're actually looking for it. Also, always have an interview in person or via video link, they said, not as Joe did on email exchange. As we said earlier, that's a big red flag. And I think the best way is look up the potential employer separately, don't accept numbers on emails or job application forms, and then just ring them up and check they are actually hiring.
What's going to happen to Joe?
Well, I've been in contact with the DWP and I asked them which bank account the money from the Universal Credit Loan they gave out went into. They didn't answer my question, but this morning they've told me they're really sorry this has happened to Joe, and they've admitted that they now know Joe was not involved and didn't make the application for the loan, so they won't be chasing him for the £1,416.42. I've spoken